This world is perplexed by three great conundrums. We cannot create a single science, therefore a single approach to solving our problems has never been available to us. We are not able to separate church from state, yet these are two intrinsically incompatible positions. The power and influence of the one will never reach its full potential so long as the other exists. We do not know how to end the 10 great evils that have always perplexed and indeed threatened the civilization of man, if not our existence and humanity. We cannot reach our full potential with the 10 great evils impacting how we live. We can assume that when these three great conundrums are solved, the solution would usher in heaven on earth, meaning that mankind's problems arise from these three conundrums. Solve them and we virtually no longer have any problems. Without these conundrums our lives would be perfected or at least perfectible. It might be noticed how tightly integrated these conundrums are. The sciences are divided because the 10 great evils seem to require different approaches, but these approaches cannot be reconciled, because the church and state both take a different approach to solving them. Indeed, it might be said that the sciences are divided into two groups because each group is aligned more with one institution than the other. It might, therefore, make sense to look at why these conundrums exist, or what makes them appear unresolvable, before we go about trying to solve the issues. The sciences, as said, are divided into two groups, the hard and soft or the physical sciences and humanities. Chemistry deals with the chemical properties of matter, mathematics with patterns and regularities, physics with the measurement of physical properties and so on. Whereas the humanities describe patterns in human behavior. When atheists compare science with Christianity, they usually describe the physical sciences, not the humanities. As a general area of study, religion of course falls under the umbrella of the humanities, so atheists are only making the argument that the hard sciences are more exact than the humanities. This is not something anyone disagrees with. The connection between church and state and the hard and soft sciences may seem nebulous, but the state is very much a part of this same kind of thinking. The hard sciences are legalistic, as are the hard sciences. The soft sciences are more description, this includes religion. But at this point Christianity and the other religions differ, for while Christianity is indeed more narrative than law, this is not true about the other, more work-based theologies, which are indeed legalistic. The hard sciences are not that hard, meaning objective. It depends on one's tolerance for imprecision. No measurement is exact except at a certain level of scale. Many of the measurements we use are precise only at low levels of magnification. The closer we look, or the higher the magnification, the lower the precision. A mile is exact in so far as a car is concerned. But to actually measure out a precise mile without variation is not possible. So, it goes with all of our measurements. They are analytically precise and can be defined with precision, but in application there are discrepancies. This is still better than the humanities, which have no reliable means to quantify results. The 10 great evils are all elements of the humanities. The church and state are inseparable because they are not quantifiable. The outlines of both are fuzzy. A priori apologetic is a way out of these conundrums. The separation of church and state, the elimination of the TGE requires the formation of a single, unified science. This science is apologetic. But we need to stop thinking about science as the study of a thing. Even though this characterization has worked for the physical sciences, it has created an entire group of narrative sciences that lack objectivity or a true standard of comparison. What matters and what we ought to be measuring is the value of our work. Science is no different from digging a well. If we can find more efficient ways of providing water, then this is science. But the science is not totally separate from the purpose of man. Science is not the search for truth, it is the search for civilization. Civilization is not complicated in its construction, it is simply the ratio between production and consumption. We must be of value. We need to be of use. Usefulness is defined by our contribution to the value of the planet. If civilization is X, then the greater the ratio of consumption to production, the lower is X. The power of the people can be measured in terms of their usefulness. Our level of usefulness gives us a value for dominion. Dominion generates civilization. We have dominion over the earth according to our level of usefulness. Civilization is a factor defined by the per capita value of a person in terms of planetary equity. We are on Earth for a reason and a purpose, and that purpose is to exercise dominion, which is another term for acquiring equity, which is another term for generating civilization. When we have dominion, we are being useful, we are creating value, we are producing a civilization. Dominion is not just the doctrine concerning the right of the people to have ultimate power, it is a methodology for acquiring power. Democracy is just another way to express the idea of dominion, but we have to identify the people who have the right to rule. Because not everyone qualifies as a person, in the legal or theological sense. But it is this very question that has always stumped and indeed, compromised democracy. Those who had the right to rule, originally were the ones who had the power to rule, namely the aristocrats. This power base was broadened as the economically powerful expanded. At first all men were eligible to vote, then all women. But there were always excluded groups who were not permitted to vote. But it is not who has the right to vote, at least in the legal sense, that ought to be asked. A better question is who has the ability to vote, or who even has the vote. But to answer this we have to determine what it means to vote, because a vote merely expresses a preference. The actual vote has no power. What passes for democracy now, is globalism, a validation of the power of the elite. The voter gets to validate the power of the state. The face that represents it is incidental to the power that retains its grip over us. The usurpation of our power is subtle, in some cases, and marginal in others, but is quite overt in most nations. The power of the people is turned into a rubber stamp exercise. The people are permitted to choose from among a limited number of options. This is not power. Democracy removes dominion. It does not produce it. An election generates subjugation. Without property there is no power. The power belongs to the state and its influencers. We are in a plutocracy, not a true democracy. Plutocracy is when power belongs to those with property and those without property are politically dispossessed. There is a war between the plutocrats or elites and socialists. Both want power and have different ways of getting it. When plutocrats create a state, it is a pseudo-democracy. A plutocracy is not just when those with power rule directly, a plutocracy is also when the rich decide who is elected, either directly or indirectly. In either case it is those who have the property who have the greatest influence over who gets elected. Plutocracy can vary from a liberal democracy in which the influence of the wealthy is preponderant but not necessarily absolute, to tyrannies in which the plutocrats hold absolute power. A dictator has absolute control over the property of the state. This is also seen in fascism. The different political systems are different ways the plutocrats wield power. The common denominator is always their preponderant control over the nation's wealth. To separate church and state, eliminate the TGE and form a single unified science means the end of naturalism and the beginning of dominionism. Nature is divested of power and man inherits it. Apologetic is the science of dominion and the study of how it is acquired. Dominion is the purpose of man, as we add value to the planet we extend our power over it. Christians have abandoned dominion for security, which is another way of saying they have avoided responsibility in exchange for a free ride. Therefore, the first thing we need to do is to separate from the state. We must take back dominion from the state. The state owns the property of the earth. The nation is public property the state assigns as it sees fit to private interests, but it holds a fiduciary interest in how private property is operated. We cannot claim allodial ownership. We have no greater rights to the earth than the state does, at least as private owners. Dominion is expressed through the church, and it is the church who is the rightful representative of Christ on earth. To separate from the state, capital is allocated to the church. This removes power from the state. When the state does not have access to the property that rightfully belongs to the church according to the principle of dominion, it cannot subsidize freeloaders. This eliminates all 10 great evils. It also provides an experiment that generates a single universal science. In conclusion, the issue that we face is the one of spiritual maturity. The spiritual mature accept responsibility, and this is tantamount to exercising dominion over the earth. One cannot have dominion unless one has assets to exercise dominion over. Socialism and public ownership is not just a political issue, it is a spiritual one. The act of taking control away from the church essentially emasculates it and prevents it from accomplishing the Great Commission.